A woman married a rich man with a big villa who warned her not to go to a locked room. She disobeyed and was shocked to find her duplicate in the room. Her husband was very angry to find out what will happen next. What is the secret behind the duplicate? At the beginning of the film, a character named Henry appeared. Henry's son was blind and he had married a girl who was younger than him. He was the wealthiest man and anyone could tell this by looking at his villa. In the next scene, Henry showed his villa to his wife. His big house had many rooms that were locked. Each room needed a biometric scan. To enter, the system was made so that all the doors would open with Henry's biometric data. As they walked near one room, Elizabeth asked Henry what was inside. Henry replied that she owned everything in that room, but she had to promise him not to go near it or enter it because his research equipment was inside. Elizabeth was surprised and said, "Am I not allowed to enter any room?" Henry explained that he had also added her biometric data to the system so she could enter any room too. The next day, Henry had to go out for something. He told Elizabeth that he would return home after. A day later, Elizabeth talked to the maid saying Henry's IQ level was very high and that he was a successful man. She wondered why he married an ordinary girl like her. The maid replied that she had no idea about that. That same night, Elizabeth was alone at home and became very curious. She thought, why shouldn't I enter that forbidden room? I want to see what is inside. Remembering Henry's words, she entered the room. Inside she found many boxes, some with red and green lights. One box with a green light showed heart rate information. As Elizabeth pressed its button, the box opened, revealing her duplicate inside. Shocked, she hurriedly left the room but injured her thumb while running. In the next scene, Henry returned home. When he saw Elizabeth looking confused, he thought that she had definitely gone into that room to see what was inside. Even though he knew this, he did not ask Elizabeth any questions. Henry then walked toward the basement. Elizabeth followed him but felt scared when she saw the sword in his hand. She noticed that Henry was very angry. He shouted, "I told you not to enter that room. Why did you go in there?" Hearing this, Elizabeth felt very afraid. She started to apologize to Henry, saying, "I'm sorry, I will never go back into that room." In his anger, Henry tried to harm Elizabeth. She ran away from him, wanting to escape the house. All the doors had been unlocked because of her biometric data, but now none of the doors opened. Poor Elizabeth could not get out of the house. She hid in a room, but Henry found her and killed her. Then Henry, his son, and the maid buried her body. In the next scene, a detective arrived. He had come here before and always asked about Henry's wife. When he visited, the detective said, "You always say the same thing when I come here. Your wife is in a deep sleep." Henry replied, "These girls today spend most of their time sleeping." After hearing this, the detective left. 6 weeks later, it showed that Henry had married Elizabeth again and brought her home. The same moments rep played just like at the beginning when Henry showed Elizabeth the entire house and warned her not to enter a specific room. This new Elizabeth also went into the same room just like the previous Elizabeth. When she entered, she saw red lights in all the boxes. Henry came in and woke her up. She said, "You all left me here alone." Henry replied, "I gave the maid the day off yesterday. She took my son with her." After that, Elizabeth went to the bathroom. Henry followed her and asked, "Did you forget your promise?" He said you would not enter that room. Henry was very angry and wanted to suffocate Elizabeth with a towel, but Elizabeth managed to escape to the kitchen. There she grabbed a knife to protect herself if Henry came after her. However, clever Henry attacked her from behind and used chloroform to make her unconscious, but Elizabeth was smart. She pretended to be out cold. When he got close, she stabbed Henry with the knife. Unfortunately, she lost consciousness from the chloroform. After injuring him, after some time when she regained her senses, she tried to unlock all the doors using Henry's fingerprints, but none of the doors opened. She hid Henry's dead body and burned several things to cover her tracks. After this, she called an emergency number, hoping someone would come to help her. Eventually, the maid and Henry's son returned home. The maid noticed that Elizabeth looked fine and realized that Henry was gone. This made her very worried and she suffered a heart attack from the shock, but before she fainted, she dialed the emergency number for help. Elizabeth noticed the unlocked door and thought about going outside. Just then, Henry's son warned her, saying, "If you leave this house, the police will arrest you for murdering Henry the First. Know what you did if you want to avoid Being arrested, you need to burn Henry's body. After that, Elizabeth and Henry's son worked together to burn Henry's corpse. Elizabeth asked Henry's son, "Who am I?" He told her Henry created 6 Elizabeths. "Like you, I'm number 5 and the other 4 are dead." As they spoke, they saw a car drive by. Since Oliver couldn't see the car, he asked Elizabeth, "What color is that car?" Elizabeth told him and he said, "That's a detective." The detective arrived and asked Oliver, "Where is Henry?" Oliver replied, "Ask Elizabeth." The detective said to Elizabeth, "Henry always told me that you were sleeping whenever I came here." Elizabeth said, "Yes, I was sleeping before, but Henry is sleeping now." Before the detective could ask more questions, Henry's son killed him. After killing the detective, Henry's son asked Elizabeth, "Is he dead or still alive?" Elizabeth replied, "He is dead." Henry's son then told her, "Run away with the money." Elizabeth took the money and held it tightly. However, Henry's son came back with the diary and asked her to read it for him because Oliver was blind and couldn't read it himself. Then Oliver locked Elizabeth in a room. While escaping, she begged him to unlock the door, but no one came to help her. Elizabeth found the same diary that belonged to Henry's maid. She started to read the diary and learned that the maid was actually a biologist. Henry had called her for help a while ago because his wife was sick and died from an illness. Henry wanted to bring his wife back to life, so he made 6 clones using her blood cells. However, 2 of the clones also had the same disease, so they died too. When the maid arrived to help Henry, there were only 4 clones left. The maid worked very hard for 2 years doing research. Finally, she discovered a cure for the clones' illness. After that, the 3rd Elizabeth was taken out of the chamber. However, this Elizabeth, who was actually Henry's wife, could not remember much for long. She went into the room where her clones were kept and felt confused when she saw them. Scared, she ran out of the house. On her way, the detective saw her and brought her back to Henry. This made the detective suspicious of Henry, which is why he often visited Henry's house in the present. Elizabeth was locked in a room when Oliver came to her. Elizabeth pushed him down when he opened the door and asked him for the password to unlock it. Then she tied him up and managed to escape the house, but Oliver told her the wrong password without her knowing. When Elizabeth tried the password, the door stayed locked, making her very angry. She went back to the room where she had tied all of her up, but he was gone holding a knife in her hand. She went to the basement where she found Oliver trying to help the last Elizabeth clone survive. Elizabeth asked him, "What are you doing here?" He replied, "I am trying to keep this Elizabeth alive, and I need your help." Hearing this, Elizabeth went to the clone, but Oliver took advantage of the situation and made Elizabeth unconscious. He put her in a room and chained her feet. In the next scene, Elizabeth was shown again reading the maid's diary. The diary revealed that the 3rd Elizabeth also met her end because her cells could not stay stable. Henry and the maid worked hard together to stabilize her cells. The story shifted back to the present where Oliver came to Elizabeth again and asked, "Does the diary say anything about me?" Elizabeth replied, "I haven't read that part yet." Oliver then told Elizabeth that he hated Henry a lot because Henry was the one who had blinded him. As Elizabeth continued reading the diary, she learned that Henry had made a young clone of his wife while he was old. He later created a younger clone of himself as well. In fact, Oliver was the young clone of Henry. When Elizabeth told this to Oliver, he felt very scared because he hated Henry and did not know he was a young clone of him. Elizabeth encouraged Oliver, but when he came closer, he pushed her down again and asked for the password to the house doors. This time Oliver gave her the correct code. Then the 6th clone of Elizabeth appeared, awakened by Oliver. The 5th Elizabeth wanted to escape because the 6th Elizabeth wanted to kill her. The 5th Elizabeth, knowing the whole truth, wanted to tell the 6th Elizabeth how they had been used, but the 6th Elizabeth did not care and did not believe her at all. When Oliver tried to go near the 6th Elizabeth, the 5th Elizabeth attacked him, pushing him toward the 6th Elizabeth. The 6th Elizabeth fired a gun and the bullet hit the 5th Elizabeth while passing through Oliver. Oliver died from the gunshot, but the 5th Elizabeth was wounded. The 6th Elizabeth went to Oliver and, taking advantage of the moment, the 5th Elizabeth entered the code to unlock the house door. She was about to leave when she attacked the 6th Elizabeth, shooting at her, but as the 5th Elizabeth was dying, she told the 6th Elizabeth to read the maid's diary no matter what. The 6th Elizabeth followed her advice and read the whole diary. She discovered that Oliver was fine because he was Henry's clone. Henry did not have any disease and wanted to kill all of Elizabeth's clones because his real wife always agreed with him whenever Henry promised the clones that they would not go into that room. They still went because of their actions. Henry wanted to kill all of them. In the end, the maid was seen in the house while the 6th Elizabeth walked away. The movie